Hello, everybody. We are here on a special episode of Alive Again. Again, here today. And as you can see, I put in the title, Chief Midegah Live. But he had some family commitments come up. So he's doing the right thing, taking care of that. So I'll be changing the title so it's more appropriate to what we're talking about today. So sorry for if there's any misunderstanding. But today we're very excited or honored, I should say, to have Sherry Cardinal here to talk to us. She's a professional with and done a ton when it comes to emotional health, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. And then we have a friend of the show, Shawn Littlebear. You guys should all know him if you haven't watched the episode. You should, go back and see it. But there he is. Hey, Shawn. And go back and see his story. And then if you look at the, I'll put in the description. There is a video that goes through Chief Midegah's story that they sent me, that they did yesterday, and I'll put that in the description so you guys can go and look and see who he is and what he means, but what his background. So if you're interested in that, I'm going to put that in the description. So we're going to take a little bit different route today, but I think it's exactly what needed to happen. So we're going to talk about, you guys all know that I've gone through some things that have caused me to have trauma, or the trauma happened and caused me to deal with PTSD severely, and I'm actually disabled officially from that. And I've talked about the things around that, but I think we're going to talk today. So that's just me, and I'm not going to go into much more about me because today is about what the Native Americans have gone through, and I don't know a way to put it, but it's rough, and we need to be educated.
Intergenerational trauma.
Yeah.
And how that happens, how it's passed on, and what we can do about it.
Perfect. That's exactly. So Sherry, and then we have Jody here, who's your assistant, right? You help Midegah. And so she's here making sure that we're not saying anything that's upsetting. So thank you, Jody. It's a little joke, but anyway, let's go this route. Littlebear, you were telling a story before about your ancestors, and I thought it would be a perfect place to start. So let's all tune in to Littlebear because he's going to tell a story that's, I think, both heartbreaking and what's the word? Brave, I guess.
Revealing?
Yeah, revealing. So Littlebear, you're on mute, I think. But if you want to start that story and tell us about what happened last week.
Yeah, there was I guess it's an annual gathering for the battle at Greasy Grass. Most people know it as where George Armstrong Custer was defeated at the Little Bighorn. And there's
most famous battle that I was, as I understand it.
Yeah, they depict everything as battlefield or battle, even though they're massacres. Really? It's one way or the other. So that one was the one that the dog soldiers came out, and people don't know that the dog soldiers actually before then had surrounded Denver, and they were really ticked off because of a couple of massacres. And the the big one that happened, everybody remembers, is Sand Creek in Colorado. where Shivington's army came in, and they were militants. They weren't regular army. They were militia, and they came in and wiped out, men, women, and children, old folks. And the main warriors weren't there. So, and this was a piece of land the government said, if you exist on this land, fly the white flag, fly our flag, you'll be at peace as long as the wind blows, as long as the grass is green. And then Shivington's army came in and just wiped them out. So, yeah, there's a lot of generational trauma from that. And the dog soldiers came in and they surrounded Denver. And if you look in the history books, it explains that, but you have to look it up. They don't want to, say anything about it. They cut the railroad off. They cut the telegraph lines. Denver was actually starving. The people were screaming that, they were cut off. They had no supplies. And finally some supplies came in and the natives took them and left. It's kind of an interesting story, but
do you know for what reason? Like they were just
we had over 40 different massacres on our people alone. And there are ones that stand out. The ones in Kansas and Oklahoma and Colorado, the ones up north in what is now, Montana and Wyoming, and then how our people were treated, in different places. So yeah, there's a lot. If you dig, you can find it. There was a lot of massacres.
And we're taught a bunch of baloney in our schools, and
or just not taught at all.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm like, there's nothing we can do to make up for what our ancestors, and I'm not talking about anyone individually, but it's something we have to talk about and recognize and honestly repent of generationally, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
And
well, on this day,
Yes.
In 1876, July the 4th, they removed all of the celebration materials on the East Coast, from New York, Boston, Philadelphia, all the way down the coast. They were getting ready to celebrate 100 years of this awesome country.
Yeah, so great.
And then the week before, they got the telegraphs that the natives had wiped out General Custer and his regiment.
7th Cav.
The Pawnee scouts looked over the ridge and they rode back to him and they said, "You're going to die today and we're out of here." And they saw 10,000 warriors, and they were not bow and arrows. They had Winchesters and repeating rifles and Spencers and lots of ammunition, and they were bristling with weapons. And they said anybody that attacks that camp is a goner.
Yeah.
So we're out of here. And they walked off. So the next week after the battle at the Little Bighorn, the East Coast was flooded with newspapers that said our general was wiped out. And instead of celebrating 100 years of this country, the whole East Coast hung black and went into mourning. So that's the reason why in the history books you never hear about the celebration of 100 years on this day, 1876. So in 1976, the 200th year celebration, that's what you hear about, the bicentennial.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why the natives at that time said enough.
And then
that's
why 78 happened.
And then the hand of God came down and said enough. He said, I will leave a remnant. So no more. So they had to change their policies. They had to change everything about how they dealt with the Indians after 1876. So Midegah was right. You know, they weren't involved, but they heard about it, and they started asserting their rights.
Ed.
There's
And-
an interesting
Go ahead, Sherry.
side story. I said there's an interesting side story to that I was telling on an earlier podcast today about how the Sioux and Cheyenne women treated Custer's body. And Littlebear, if you know something more or less, please tell me and correct me. The understanding is that the women took sewing awls and punctured his ears because he wouldn't listen, because the colonizers wouldn't listen to the indigenous peoples. And I told that story today because, again, being July 4th, they still don't listen.
Nope.
You know, I kind of see myself as a sewing awl that said, listen up here. This is what's happened. And it's time that you start to recognize it and do something about it and quit denying it. I think part of what bothers me about these, like a holiday like July 4th, even though my mother's side was completely European, is that they don't recognize what it took and what they did to establish this great country. I see both sides of it, but I think it's important right now, especially, that the indigenous voice be heard, and that the symbolic sewing awl in the ear is still needed today. Like, let's wake up. Let's deal with our history and the trauma truthfully and not whitewash it, if you'll pardon the expression.
No, I
Or
think it's accurate.
sweep it under the table.
Part of it's a fear, because what it implies that we did. What does it imply? That we are. And I think that's significant. And what does it look like going forward? Having something, a path to be able to grow together and have it be a healing situation, because that is, I think, what you guys that I've heard all the podcasts. That's what I mean by you guys. Is that's what you're looking for, is a healing, and you know, and to be heard and have things acknowledged. You're absolutely right, and I think that's very important, because we need to repent. I'm sorry, we do, as the European people that came in, and I know it's our ancestors in general, but it's still going on today in many ways.
That's the problem.
Yeah, and we're still, like, blood quantum is a huge issue. I think it's horrible. So things are still happening today, people, that we need to recognize. But you were going to say something, Littlebear? What was that?
I was going to say that Custer was brought into a Cheyenne teepee in 1872, and he smoked a peace pipe with our headsman and the chiefs and our arrow keeper, the keeper of our covenant.
Okay, thanks for
and
explaining
he made a promise there that he would never kill another Cheyenne. He would never take another Cheyenne life. And they said, on your life, you will smoke. And he didn't understand. You know, he just thought, well, these natives, you know, I can go in and do what I want. Well, they dumped the ashes of the pipe on his boots. And they said, if you do kill another Cheyenne, your life is forfeit.
He made a covenant, like a straight up covenant with you guys.
Yeah, oh
before
yeah,
God.
because they didn't know, but the sacred arrow covenant was in that teepee. He was making a promise before our covenant. And the ladies that were present, that were watching from outside, were the women warriors and the Women Warrior Society.
Mhm.
So when other things happened, building up to it, um, there were certain things that happened. And before the battle, there was some, I don't know how you say it. At the Wolves, lots were cast,
Okay.
and the Dog Soldiers and the Kit Fox Warrior Society were deciding who would go first into battle, who would charge in the front line on horses and on foot.
And would that be
And
considered an honor?
the Dog Soldiers won that.
Okay.
So the Kit Fox pulled back, and they're the ones that surrounded Major Reno and his men, and they were shaking so much they threw down their weapons, and they stood there thinking they were going to get wiped out. And the natives circled them, and they said, "You don't want to fight. You threw down your weapons. So as long as you don't touch your weapons, we're not going to do anything to you." So they basically, the Kit Fox surrounded them. And then the Dog Soldiers themselves were the ones that went in with the women and the men on foot. And they knocked Custer off of his horse with a gunshot. And he was still alive. And it was one of the warrior women that had an elk bone. And in the middle of that elk bone, it was about 6 inches long. And she had an awl that came out her fingers about 6 inches, that was pierced through the middle of that elk bone. And it was an elk antler, actually.
Okay.
And the bone that stuck out was like a fine needle. It was thick at the base, but it went to a point at the top. And it was about 6.5 inches long. So you could grab it like this, but the point came out in the middle of your fingers. And she took that antler, and just like the Hebrews, 4 times, 4 piercings in each ear. And she uttered the words in Cheyenne, "Maybe this will open your ears in the spirit world." So it was done with them. And then she picked up his sword and she took it. And that's the reason why when they dance, Plains women wear the little shiny thing in the front, the long dangling thing.
The drop.
And that represents the sword that was taken from Custer on that day. So it's a generational thing. And they're taught, you have the right because you are a descendant.
Yeah.
And the things that are passed down are trying to heal with prayers, with song, with everything that we do to heal the next generation. And, you can tell by the women's shawls, the fringe that is on there is always 2 pieces that come together. Just like a talit, at the corner, they make certain knots.
Okay.
And those 2 represent the commandments.
Okay.
And those 2 represent the tablets that were brought off the mountain, that were woven together. And the women wear them to remind the men, you are to obey these 10 commandments. That's what your job is. And you see the buckskin dancers with the long fringe off of their arms. It's long and straight. And what it represents is the straight and narrow path.
So we're talking ancient Hebrew, language, and we're talking,
you are to walk that path through your life. And if you do not, you've got to face the Creator at the end of your life. You're the one that says, each individual, but the women have that responsibility to remind the men this is a long, straight, and narrow path. So when you look at what they wear, when you look at the meaning of it, it's Hebrew, yes,
Yeah.
but it's passed down.
Yeah.
And the way that we dance is we want to heal. The songs are meant to heal people. I was a drum carrier for almost 30 years till I, started having health problems. But I was there at the powwows and enjoying the music, and I was singing the music. And I knew that our people have to heal from this generational trauma. All the things we went through, all the things that we remember, that our grandfathers and grandmothers taught us. And how do we do that? Well, we do that by coming together and saying, hey, it's not only up to us, it's up to society in general. It's up to this government. It's up to other tribes for us to band together.
Yeah.
It's up to those, those stanchions. We call them the pillars of heaven. It's up to the pillars of heaven so that we can heal completely. So we have healing runs. There's horseback rides. There's walks. There's all kinds of things everybody's involved in every year. And other tribes do it. And it's for healing. They run all the way from Oklahoma into Colorado. And they horseback down from the northern plains. And it's meant to heal and bring people together. And we're just doing things all year round now. And local things that are, interstate, things that, people bring up, that we're into this thing. The U.S. government promised all the descendants of the Sand Creek Massacre. They actually tallied it up and said, we owe you this many blankets, this many, all the cooking materials.
Oh, yeah, because that's going to fix it, right?
Yeah, and then they said, okay, we're going to put this in Congress. And Congress passed it and said all the descendants will receive compensation. It passed it, it went into law, and then nothing happened.
We're still waiting.
We're still waiting.
I call and say, those of us, just all of us, those of us that actually came and took, and like you've said, killed. We do have to take responsibility, and I think there's things that, and not in a way that's just, they're not our enemy. They shouldn't be our enemy. They are of the house of Israel. They are, we should be trying to connect with them and have kindness towards them and them towards us. And that's how it should be. And that's how it will be in the end. So if you read, and if you're a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and you read 3rd Nephi, he is going to do something that is going to surprise us as far as his God's favor. It's right in 3rd Nephi. He says it 3 different times. Christ does. So be aware that that's going to happen at some point. And so we need to honor the things that they have gone through in their history, because that's the only way that we get to God.
Yeah, and
go ahead.
You're touching on a very important point there, Mike, is that the precepts of the LDS Church, many of them are based on indigenous, like Midegah Win practices and Midegah Win songs, and our scrolls, our history scrolls. And sometimes that gets convoluted backwards.
What do you mean by that?
I think we forget in the church our own history. We get enamored with ourselves.
Or we don't know it.
Yeah.
What
Well,
we did.
I mean, it's
Sorry, go
there.
ahead.
And I think right now is the time when more of it's being revealed, and people aren't happy about it.
Nope.
You know, because it's saying you have some responsibility in the healing, and they have yet to acknowledge the trauma. And the LDS Church, I mean, the precepts come from the Midegah women. There wouldn't be an LDS Church if Smith hadn't somehow come across them. That's a long story that can be debated, but he did. Okay, so
well, even in our core belief of the golden plates, it's still their history either way.
Yes,
no matter what. So, go ahead, continue.
And I appreciate Littlebear's perspective because it fleshes out the whole story of the Battle of Greasy Grass, Little Bighorn. He has details that most people don't have, and certainly the history books don't have.
Yeah.
And I would encourage you, Littlebear, as much as possible, if it's not already written, to write it down so that it's not forgotten, so that it's not lost, so that it's not hidden. Use your own spiritual discernment about that, of course. But again, part of our job right now is to bring to the forefront the truth. See, I'd never heard the story of Denver being surrounded by the dog soldiers. That had to have been formidable. I mean, incredibly. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps just trying to picture it. You know, these are the highest warriors, and I honor you for that in you. But this stuff shouldn't be lost and hidden anymore. So it might be time to start speaking up, and I'm very glad you're speaking up today, Littlebear, and I thank you for that.
So
You're
what,
welcome.
Sherry, you are, with your background, and maybe give a 30-second overview of where you are, so you know what you're talking about.
Yes.
What does it look like for stepping forward? How do we get there? Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, let me just tell you a little bit about where I'm coming from. Miss Cozy Kwe Nin Digo Ojibwe Mo Adik Songab Dudem. I am Miss Cozy Kwe, the Red Woman of the Standing Bear clan, an Ojibwe person. I am the chief grandmother of Red Bears at the Red Bear Nation, Pembina Chippewa Nation, and my role with Midegah is as the chief grandmother to help guide him in his journey and his duties. And our personal relationship is much more of that of as mother and son. Okay, we are related lineally. Our paths, our relations cross. He calls me crazy interwoven because of the way my Indigenous and French Canadian Métis history is woven in with his. We have common relatives. And that's me from that point of view. From the other point of view, my name is Sherry Rose Cardinal. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, a diplomat in the American Academy of Experts in Traumatic Stress. I have spent the last 45 plus years as a psychotherapist in private practice on one hand, and as a spiritual advisor healer on the other hand. I combine the two. I'm also an ordained minister So I do non-sectarian ceremonies for people, weddings, funerals, whatever they ask for. I do not do indigenous ceremonies. That's not my calling. But I do indigenous teachings to help the healing process. That's kind of it in a nutshell.
That was actually very succinct and perfect for what we were going for. Little Bear, I was going to mute you because of the echo. So if you need to speak and you feel to speak, go ahead and do that, and we can unmute you and go that way, just so that we can not have the echo. But anyway, continue, Sherry, on now that we know where you come from, who you are. So you have blood from both sides. You've kind of lived in both worlds, right?
I do live in both worlds. It's a daily occurrence. I was adopted at birth, and I think that's important because it's something that happened a lot in the 50s and 60s. They call it the scoop, where children of indigenous heritage were taken from their families and adopted into European families. That's what happened to me. I have researched as much of the detail as I can find, and I have found a lot of indigenous family, of course, of which Midegah is one, and a half brother from my Bouvier side, which was indigenous and French Canadian.
Okay.
The Bouvier lines are predominant in the Hudson's Bay Company and in the Northwest Company and in the fur trade and in the buffalo hunting back in the day. Okay. So it's the common word for it is Métis, but it's a little more than Métis. That's kind of weird to explain. But my birth mother's side was totally European. It goes back to the Mayflower 3 times.
And so we're related, most likely. So yeah, that's where mine go.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Which Mayflowers?
The actual Mayflower. There was I have a few that were in that original Protestant.
You know colony. Their names?
No, I've just read their stories, and so I would need to go back because there's a lot of different people.
Well, we might be cousins.
Yeah, I would like to look at that.
I find cousins everywhere because of that, especially in New England. I live in Maine on the coast.
Okay.
I find cousins everywhere.
Yeah, that's where they lived, up there.
Yes. Yeah. Where was I going with that? Oh, so it took me until I was a teen. I was sort of denied my birthright. And it took me till I was a teenager. And I came across some Tuscarora Indians during the time of the Niagara Power Project. Our family moved to Niagara Falls. And we met Chief Elton Green and a very influential fellow named Wallace Mad Bear Anderson. And they kind of mentored me into the indigenous teachings and about my heritage.
And how old were you, if you don't mind me asking, at that time? Like, how
14, 13, 14. Man. Yeah. And up to then, I had no idea where I was from. I knew I was adopted, but I had no history on me. I was not given any history, and I've since found the history, and it's kind of convoluted as those things were in those days. So I've walked in 2 worlds my whole life, at least since I was a teenager, and cognizant of the fact that there was something more to me than met the eye. And so I have the British on one side, the French on the other side, and the indigenous. And if you look at the history of the Eastern, what is now called Canada and the United States, all 3 of these were fighting each other for decades. So I have no preference to either one in the sense that I can't split myself off like that. I have to honor all sides of
Which
my
is a
heritage.
healthy way to look at it. I think as a country, we are actually doing the exact opposite. Where
Yeah,
we
which
are,
is my point.
yeah,
Part of my
continue then.
point of healing is that we can't be anti. Anti is anti-healing. And that it's learning about, part of healing is learning about yourself, becoming self-aware, learning how to honor yourself, and it's part of healing the wounds. The wounds of trauma run deep. They're physical as well as psychological.
Yep.
They manifest as behavioral as well as physical illnesses,
Yep.
and addictions, and relationship problems,
One
and
second.
every. Yep.
Sorry, did you say something, Little Bear? You have to go?
Yeah, I'm going to have to go here in a minute,
Okay.
but I wanted to tell you, Sherry, thank you for what you're sharing. It is good. Ishpiva.
Wado, yes. Miigwech.
Yeah.
I speak a little
So,
Cherokee too. Sometimes I get mixed up.
yeah.
Yes, Little Bear, I look forward to meeting you.
I hear them on the eastern side of Oklahoma when they say Wado, Wado,
Wado, yeah.
or
Wado.
they say
Osio.
Muddo,
Wado.
yeah.
Osio.
And we say pivot, ish pivot.
Yeah.
It's good, good medicine. So I'm sorry I have to go, but
Understood.
I wish everybody a good holiday, and I wish you all the best. So thank you for having
we'll
me
meet
on.
again.
Little Bear, it was meant to be that you came on and opened. So I appreciate you coming. And we will talk more later, I'm sure. So you have a good fourth. If
good teaching, thank you.
So,
yes.
Thank you, Little Bear. Okay, Sherry. Let's get back to where you were. Sorry for interrupting, but wanted to say goodbye.
Okay. Then we go with the flow, right?
Yeah, I like it.
We go with the flow. Midegah and I got together based on our lineages. We met kind of surreptitiously on a genealogical site.
Huh.
And we found that as we found our lines were crossing, and we were checking each other out, like, who is this person?
Who's this person?
Yeah. Why does he keep cropping up, and why does she keep cropping up? And so we started talking and got together and found out how our paths intertwined.
Okay.
And he was just growing into what you see now. This was several years ago. He was right at the beginning of his path. I was kind of right at the end.
2017-ish.
For him? No.
Oh, maybe when you. Sorry, I meant when he received the mantle from his grandma.
Oh, no, he was in his late 30s.
Okay.
Yeah. Early 40s. It was only a year before I met him that his grandmother had named him.
Okay.
As hereditary chief. And he was looking for helpers, for advisors, for counsel. And, Richard Warren, that's up there. Richard Warren is one of my lineal relatives. Hi, Gus.
Did Jody find something? What'd you find, Jody?
Well, I have to confess, several weeks ago, I did a search on Cardinal. We're related, Sherry. Chief Midegah and I are interrelated the same way as you are. In every line of my family, he's a part of it. In every line of mine and his, on both sides. The pioneers, the church, the French, the Métis. Where your Cardinal is in there, Bouvier's in there, or Bouvier. What else did you say earlier today? All of it is. So yeah, we're connected as well. So Richard Warren is actually my 10th great grandfather.
Mine too.
And there's more, but we could talk here.
Hopkins.
Wow.
Yeah, Hopkins.
That's awesome.
Yep.
And I'll confess now, when this is over, I'm gonna go like digging and find, whatever, where I'm at, because I do cross over a lot of those, the area. We were living in the same areas, so.
Well, chances are we're related.
Yeah.
And you know what it's about? It's not just about lineage. It's about the spirituality of indigenous people when we say all our relations. There's actual physical truth to that in terms of heritage, lineage, but more so the spiritual aspect of that is that we all come from the same earth. We're all made up of the same elements. We're all mostly water.
Spirits coming down.
Ogichakwan, the spirits lowered into this body.
Lowered.
Yes. And so I just find it confirmation all the way around that when you find the actual lineages, that it just augments all the spiritual lineages. And that's why I like to do genealogy, because you find people that you're related to that you never would have guessed. And if people were to look into it more, they'd realize that they probably have more indigenous blood than they recognize because of the way intermarriage took place. There were only 100 and some settlers originally.
Yeah.
Who are they going to marry?
And then we were taking and trying to, we thought we had a better way. So we're going to, I can't think of the word right now, but that we were trying to civilize, and that's horrible.
Trying to civilize people that were already much more civilized.
Lived by kindness within their own tribes. I mean, the tribes from what I understand, there's many, right?
Yeah.
Like over 900 according to Congress. That's a whole nother story. That's very long and very sad. But the thing that I understand and what I've seen is most indigenous people, they have a softness or a humility about them that is much different from the colonizers. That's all I can say.
That's because of our spirituality. Our 7 grandfather teaching, humility is one of the main topics. Love, courage, truth, honesty, humility, respect. Our lives are based on that, and that changes our whole perspective, and because we honor Mother Earth and we honor other living and animals, plants, minerals, it doesn't matter. We honor all of it. And science is finally catching up to us.
So
recognizing that trees talk to each other, trees have communities and families, and plants do.
Brought that up on this channel because we talk a lot about NDEs, and because Renelle, my partner in crime on this show, she had one, and it was very detailed. And one of the things she talks about is the trees talking to each other, and males, females, and that it's life.
Mother trees. Forests are matrilineal.
And I'll tell you, they respect women like we should.
Oh,
at
yeah,
least
don't get
traditionally. But I kind of want to, because it's so important that we recognize our internal biases that we have, because we need to be able to make change. And how do we do that? Is partly one way is we need to respect. We need to be able to have respect for who and where we all come from, and essentially between Native Americans and the rest that came here. So,
and it all starts with respect of Creator, because
yes,
without that, if He created everything, including man and women, and if we disrespect any part of creation, then we're disrespecting Creator, and we don't think of it that way, especially in patriarchal mindsets. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. European
rebalancing the relationship between men and women, I think, is one of the main things that has to happen in this world. And the fact that we're out of balance is what brings so much chaos and killing and hatred. Because you can't hate another being without also hating yourself.
And then that goes to your children.
Yes.
As well.
We teach hate. Yeah. We teach hate in school. We even are teaching children to hate their own bodies in school right now. Transgender is a whole nother topic.
Yeah.
But we're teaching children to hate their own bodies, not come to terms with it. But, I'm uncomfortable in this body. Well, let's change it. No. No, you were born. You were born a certain way. Let's try to come to terms with that before you run off to man to change who God created you to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Transgender community doesn't like me very much because I believe it's just all, as a mental health professional, of course, but spiritually, of course, there's something concretely wrong with a man being born a man saying he's a woman and vice versa. You're not
mainly because we need to respect what God made. I think that's a big part of it, and that's probably.
And it also it's between men and women. You look at the chaos in the world, and who's at the head of it?
Oh yeah, old men.
And that's not to shame men in particular, because. As Maya Angelou says, when you know better, you do better. The problem is getting them to know better. There's too much power. You have a problem
listening sometimes.
That's why the owl in the ear.
Yeah.
I love that story because it illustrates the problem that we're so closed off to anything but that mindset, that European patriarchal mindset, that we forget that there's been another way, and we set out to destroy it. The matrilineal lines of the indigenous people, the patriarchy can't comprehend.
Yeah.
Because if they did, it would mean their demise of their power.
Yep. And I think that is very evident between the two communities because we look at it and the mindset is different. The mindset of the Native Americans seem to be more about balance between male and female. And that's, in my personal belief, in my marriage, yes. Will you explain to my listeners why you're holding up that flower? Because I know exactly what you're talking about. So
actually, it's a feather.
What did I say, flower?
Yes.
Wow, that's embarrassing. Everybody, I apologize. I'm a little mixed up.
It's actually an eagle feather. Okay. And we use this to teach the balance that needs to happen in the world. And very quickly here, this stem, which holds it all together, is what we call the 7 grandfather teachings. Okay, the spirituality of how to live the good life.
Laws of Noah, right? Essentially.
Yeah, but there's an interesting difference.
Okay.
The 7 Noahide laws and the 7 grandfather teachings essentially are the same in essence, but they're decreed differently.
Okay.
The Noahide laws are prohibitive. Thou shalt not.
Yeah.
Okay. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not kill, whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
the seven grandfather teachings are permissive. You will live with love, peace, and the teachings of all of that in the positive sense.
So like the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I mean, so that type of difference between the law as prohibitive to
Yes.
when the Christ or the peacemaker,
Mm-hmm.
I think they're the same, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We all believe that.
Yeah. Anyway, that's how he taught, and so you had it. And so there's very serious you have it. The teachings.
Yes.
And it's
and
beautiful.
we need to restore them, because the critical thing here is you can think of this as a bird feather, eagle feather, which it is, of course, but they built airplanes after it. The wing of an airplane and the mechanics of an airplane are based on this feather. Okay? And this side of the feather provides the lift and the descent. It's the heavy side of the feather to provide lift and descent. It's like the ailerons on a plane. Okay? If they're up to get lift, and when they're down, the flaps are down, it helps with the descent. And this we call the male side. It's the doing side. It's the side that goes out and makes the way.
Yeah. More, it's assertive, right?
Yes. Again, lift or descent.
Yeah.
We've been doing a lot of descending lately.
Yeah. I mean, I think we hit
Not
the
much
ground
lifting.
100 years ago. So,
No. And this side of the feather we consider the female side. This is the guidance side. This is the side that provides the information for where you're going, for the pathway, the guidance. Okay? So you have to have both for the feather or the airplane to work, right? If you don't have the guidance, okay, you don't have lift or descents. You're basically what we call a ground eagle. And if someone ever calls you a ground eagle, it's a pretty big insult, because it means turkey. And turkeys can't fly.
Gobble, gobble.
Okay. So in order for eagle to fly, there has to be this balance and this rigid stem in between to hold it all together. So it has to have this balance. Without that balance, you have chaos. You're grounded. You can't fly.
Yeah.
Eagle can't fly.
And the feather can't be held together without the seven grandfather teachings.
Right. Exactly.
It needs to be.
This would all be stuff on the ground. Okay.
Yeah.
This would all be stuff on the ground. So that's why it's important to us, and that's why it's sacred to us, because it teaches. Everything in the indigenous world is a way of teaching. Midegah taught the other night about the three main poles of the teepee.
I watched that. It was amazing.
Okay. Everything we do is based on teaching to remind us and to keep us mindful of our place and of our paths, and our spirituality, Ogichagwan.
And it's powerful because you've held on to large parts of it for 200 years, way more. Like,
and where do you find this in the schools today? You don't.
I didn't know till I was in my late 30s, and now I'm 40. I'm old.
We try to teach indigenous children this from birth. And that's why they had to take the children away from us.
Yeah.
Okay? In the scoops and in the boarding schools, because if they kept following the teachings, that's where the power was. So they had to teach them the opposite. Oh, the white man's way.
Yeah. Or just take care of and not have those generations, like the forced sterilizations.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So part of healing trauma is bringing this back into our consciousness. and bringing the teachings back into our consciousness, along with some good trauma-informed care.
Yeah.
And we do know that trauma is both physical and psychiatric or psychological and spiritual.
And spiritual.
That all those three things need to be addressed as part of the healing process. And unfortunately, a lot of modern psychology, psychiatry does not do that. In fact, when I was going to school, we were almost prohibited from teaching anything spiritual or even bringing it up as part of the session, which is why I kind of broke with traditional therapy. And I call what I do kind of coaching a lot, because it frees me from those boxes.
Yeah, that's good.
And, do therapy where it's needed and do medical backup where it's needed. Make sure people get what's available.
Right.
But I don't focus on the DSM-5, 5R, whatever number it is now. I don't focus on the medical model. I don't focus on individual pathology. People that have trauma had bad things happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
It's an injury. You don't say a person with a broken leg, is crazy.
Nope.
A person with trauma who has trauma sickness isn't crazy either. They have behavioral problems. But if you think about it, so do people with broken legs. It's just different.
Yeah, it's different.
So that's how I incorporate indigenous healing in my quote unquote practice or my calling. I prefer to think of it as a ministry. That's different than mainstream. And that's why we need places for indigenous people to go that take all of this into account, and that we can train other trauma-informed therapists in the indigenous issues, because most of them don't get it. I've also done a lot of trauma intervention with military and first responders. They're very misunderstood too, because they're a type of warrior.
Yeah.
And people don't understand the trauma that they face on a daily basis. They'd rather point the finger and say, look what that cop did.
Yeah.
Okay. Or point the finger at the poor Vietnam veterans. Look what they did in my life.
Yeah.
Well, how did that happen?
Horrible parents and all that stuff. But why?
Yeah.
Why?
And it affects every area of their life. So we need to address every area of their life. It's not just a psychiatric injury. It's a whole life injury.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that really speaks to me. When I was dealing with, I didn't know what was happening to me as I was descending in my late 20s. And I just broke down, right? And it just happened over time. But an injury unhealed will continue to injure you. Mm-hmm. And so what I have found, and the thing that I love about the flower, I said it again. That's embarrassing for me.
I don't have a flower.
Feather, I can say it, people, feather, light as a feather. Anyway.
Well, it is rather imposing.
Yeah, it is right in the front of the screen. So I would say, the big problem I've had is I've gone and tried to heal. And it brings up, you have to kind of address and face that pain, which is very difficult and all of that.
That's what stops most people.
Yep. And if you don't have that foundation and what you're talking about, I think it's that you're not replacing, you're not moving forward, you're not replacing that hole that is made. And I'm trying to say is, in my own life, that is where I found refuge. It's with my family, with my wife, with my spiritual healing that I've received. It was my story
Mm-hmm.
I was healed spiritually in a way that is different. I still have my physical scars in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
They're there. And I have to work around them, and it's difficult sometimes, a lot of the time. But nevertheless, that is where I find solace. That is where I find refuge. And I think that, I think repairing that and doing exactly what you're saying with not the flower, but the feather, I think it's necessary. And so I know Midegah has talked about having a university that deals with the trauma of people, and then you place them into rehabilitation with family and to learn how to heal, because that's where it's at. That's what God intends us to be and do.
I totally agree, but I'm going to throw a caution flag.
Okay, please do.
Some of the trauma comes from the family.
Yeah.
And you have to be very astute. You know, and I saw this a lot in child welfare. Well, the child belongs with the mother. You know, you used to see these old prejudices. Or it's best if the child is with family. Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Not if the trauma is coming from the family.
You're absolutely
right.
And
so then you need a place for the family to heal first before you can integrate it. You know, and that's what's wrong with the medical model. It takes a person individually.
Yeah.
And they incorporate some family.
As kind of a group generalization, right?
Yes. Instead of focusing on the family. Where have I heard that title before? You know, you take Midegah's example, and if you heard his life story, if you watch that, how do you heal that family? It is so fractured from so many different angles, okay, that sometimes the best you can do and the only option you have is just to deal with the individual. But ideally, you're right. If the family is a loving, functional family, that's the best place. And that was the God-intended place. But we have to recreate that in a different way when the family is part of the problem.
That makes sense.
That's why we call it, you know, our indigenous family.
Yeah, you need a home. You need a place where you can have refuge. And so you're absolutely, and if you can find that with loved ones that in healthy relationships.
Yep.
Yeah, so you're right. That intervention looks different for each individual, right?
Yes.
And so it's an individual thing, but I think understanding for the individual that's going through something, having an understanding of where they're going and what it could look like, and gives hope.
It's a very tender process. It's a very tender process. Yeah. And here's the thing spiritually. I find that many traumatized people are very disconnected from their spirit.
Yeah.
As well as their body.
I was completely shut, like nothing gets through for 7 years. And you have to be
very careful about touching that. Again, I operate non-sectarianly. I don't advocate any religion or any particular denomination. I think that's part of the seeking for each individual.
Yeah.
What resonates with them. Mm-hmm. That's where I guess split with a lot of Christians and even Mormons, that I don't think proselytizing is an answer. But I think guiding them, remember the guidance?
Yeah.
Guiding them to search for their own sense of spirituality, wherever that lands them.
Yeah.
It might land them in a Presbyterian church or in the LDS church, or I have clients that that follow Buddha. And the amazing thing is that they say the same things. Buddha's teachings and the seven grandfather teachings do this too.
It's all, wow. That's all. It's
Yeah.
all one God. God
Yes.
created us.
Exactly.
And he will feed us spiritually.
Yeah.
And so if
And-
that
and
means, I you know what? Actually, I think you might be convincing me of that a little bit, because I'm a member of the church, and so of a Mormon essentially. So I am. I went on a mission and had great experiences, right? But you know what? We live in a world where we need to be able to seek, and that's not what's taught. And
No, and when we do that, we're inviting people into our world instead of us learning about their world. And I think mission by definition is learning about their world, not imposing ours on them.
well, that's what Ammon did. He went in and if you guys know the story out there,
Yes.
he went in and he met King Lamoni and instantly said, "I'll serve you."
Mm-hmm.
That is what a mission should look like. And
That was Jesus' mission.
yep,
He
he
the
visited
servant
all his
healer.
sheep.
Yeah. We're to be
So-
servants, and we forget that. And we get
Yeah.
arrogant.
It's hard not to in this world, because that's what they teach.
Yep.
They teach you need to have confidence,
Mhm.
you know. But what? Yeah, it's
They don't teach critical thinking much anymore.
correct, and that's a problem. So
So that's part of what I try to integrate into the trauma healing is all of these things that we've been talking about, and helping people to find their own path.
yeah,
In my definition, trauma fractures the self, and it's body, soul, and spirit. Things get fractured, things get broken through trauma.
yep,
And I see it as my mission to lead them back to themselves, not to my belief system, not to psychiatry, not all those things might be helpful. But what is most important is I meet the person where they are and provide the guidance to help them get back to themselves.
yeah.
Become
And then they're
whole.
actually in a whole situation where they can seek and find,
Mhm.
and then they're in a place where they can learn. Because if you don't have humility, how do you learn? You don't. You just think you're right.
Mhm.
And it's hard not to get in that mindset sometimes.
Yes.
Ask my wife. She'll tell you. You know?
I would like to sit down with your wife.
Yeah, she's beautiful and a wonderful person, and she really completes who I am, and actually grounds me in a way that, is realistic, because I get up there sometimes, in the clouds.
She's doing this.
Exactly. Sometimes I go too high. Sometimes I crash.
Mhm.
But she
That's
does
a
help.
pitfall of being male, I think.
Yes, I have fallen in that same pit many times, and somehow
And women have the opposite pitfall. Whoop. Oh gosh, what did I do?
I see you still.
Okay, I don't see you. Where are you? Oh,
I'm here. Hello.
hello. What happened?
I'm
Oh, there
still
you
here,
are.
I promise.
There we go.
Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be back.
Good.
Women have the opposite issue, is that we don't stand up. We don't do the guidance. Okay, not as guidance. I mean, guys will talk about, I'm tired of being nagged. Well, I'm not sure how much of it is nagging or how much of it is guidance you don't want to hear. Probably a little bit of both. Okay.
Is it about
Guidance
cleaning or
isn't-
about direction in life? But the cleaning's still important,
Guidance
I guess.
isn't about telling people what to do.
Yeah.
giving them the tools to do what they need to do.
I love that. They should put that on a plaque.
No, go for it.
Yeah.
Just put my name underneath it. Miss Goziquay said.
That's what she said. And you know what? She guides. If I put it on there, then, I don't give guidance. That's anyway, maybe I do.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes. We all have that in us to a degree, I think. Getting in touch with the both feminine and masculine identities within themselves. Not identities, but we have to be able to grow. And become
we all have this.
Yeah.
The eagle has this in spades.
Yeah.
Wonder how many feathers an eagle actually has. But we
good
have
question.
the same composition.
Yeah.
We're not different. And when this is out of balance, we're out of balance.
Yeah.
Within ourselves.
Yep.
And I'm going to direct people to my website, because I have tools on my website that you're free to use just about what we're talking about. And my website, there's two ways of getting to it. One is criticalincidentstress.com. You can.
And I will put this in the description, everybody. I'll put her website on there as well. I just need to find it, and I'll put it there before the end of the show. Okay.
And the other way to get it's called supportiveonlinesolutions.com.
Okay.
SOS.
Save our souls. Save our souls.
That and lots of other things, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's the universal distress signal.
So, when it comes to large scale, we've talked about individual.
Mm-hmm.
What does it look like for us to become a united type people? I think I look at Midegah and the things he talks about. And the end result is us being in a united state and having love for brothers and sisters. And so I just am looking, hopefully you understand what I'm trying to ask, is what would that path look like for people? How do we help? How do we get there? How do we lock arms with those that are struggling so much? What is it that we can do?
I said this on another podcast, and what I said was, do your job. Do your job. Do this. If all of us as individually said, you know what, I need to put myself back in balance. There are areas of my life where I'm not in balance. And I'm like, then do it individually, and then collectively we have a chance, because as long as we're fighting one another and not listening to one another, there's no chance. There's no chance. Yeah.
Or denying.
We're denying. And as long as you're in denial, there's no healing.
Yeah, there isn't.
Okay.
When we look at a lot of what happens even today is at the wrong end of a gun. It's an implied threat, and it's horrifying to think about personally. So
Hold on here just for a second.
Yeah. Totally
There
fine.
we go.
I just saw your private message, Jody.
Mm-hmm. So
Go check.
Seeing what that's about, I'm not sure. sometimes when we talk about this stuff, it opens wounds for people, and it's a trigger.
Yeah.
So, then there's that. But individually, we have to do our own work, which is why I'm saying there's resources plus on my website. There's resources plus on the Cardinal Hour podcast. They're called the Cardinal Hour. It was me and Midegah doing that, the Cardinal Hour. And all of it was intended to give resources for trauma-informed care for Indigenous peoples and others, because it works for everybody. That's the fun thing about it.
We all are. We all come from the same God.
Yes.
So
it doesn't have to be just Indigenous.
Yeah.
So, but it works for everybody, and that's part of our role right now. And the prophecy, I think of the prophecy, Crazy Horse, that we will bring healing to a wounded world.
I need to read that prophecy.
Yeah. Crazy Horse. No.
So,
and I'm paraphrasing there, but basically that's
Christ himself talks about that, and I think it's important for us to take responsibility for ourselves and make choices that will lead to healing through our generations. Because as we raise our children and as we go forward, being correctly taught and informed of what is happening and trying to bring peace to their hearts and peace to the hearts of all God's children. And so it's going to take a while, but I think it needs to be through the individual, right? So we have to make that choice. Do your job. I like that.
Do your job. And that's why we're doing these podcasts, because that's our message.
Yeah.
It's not up, it's not up to somebody else to do your job. Personal responsibility is the antithesis to the chaos. It's nobody else's fault but yours.
Yeah.
How your life is going. You can blame and shame somebody else all you want, but you're wasting your breath.
Yeah.
And part of the website the information I gave you was called the 7 Essential Keys for Peace and Well-Being. And it's all about how to tune into the self. Because it all begins and ends right here in your relationship with God.
And
Spirit, whatever you want to call him. Jesus.
Midegah talks about a drop of water or us, our spirit.
One drop of water,
And how that
and
affects.
that's do your job.
Yeah. And that connection that can happen between you and other people can lift them up as well, like the flower. Feather. Wow. That's 3 times, people. I am... Yeah. So I saw there was an urgent email. What was...
Yeah, I got a handle on it. Thank you.
Okay, cool. I didn't get it, so it was...
Yeah. It's kind of time to wrap it up anyway, because I'm starting to lose my voice again.
Okay. That actually works great. So I just wanted... And we'll just end there with do your job, do your research, understand where you live, who you are, and understand where you come from, because that's going to determine where you go. And so you need to look at who you are and what you can do to connect yourself to the human family and bring us together, because God is doing the work now. He's doing his work. And are we going to go along? That's kind of that's how
the one last illustration I want to give is this. Every time you're pointing the finger at somebody else, there's 3 pointing back at you. So if you're shaming and blaming the other side, whether it be blue, green, red, purple, orange, pink, I don't care.
Yeah.
Okay. There's 3 pointing back at you saying it's the majority of it's your responsibility. So do your job.
I like it. That's a good place to end probably. Do your job. Everybody, thank you for tuning in this special episode. And just remember to do your job. And remember that we are trying to create unity and love. And that is where we need to, I think we've covered it all here, but respect each other's path and what we're going through, and understand that we all are going through stuff, and we all are in a foreign land, meaning
Yes.
in our bodies and here. And so connect and love. That's what we need to do. So I'll see everybody, as I always end. We'll see you on the other side.
Yeah. Thank you.